Two soul notes on a lilting ship in the distant sea. A stormy sea with a rising ship on a breezy tidal wave of love, light, melody, and harmony. That's music, plain and simple. The dynamics, the ability to connect on a spiritual level when music transcends this planet and becomes a planet of its own, because the soul notes are playing in a thatched roof house in a golden room with blue flames bouncing off the walls. Cutting some good music now, maybe more than ever, as the soul notes float through their existence as message makers and communicators dedicated to evolution, which encompasses spirituality, education, love, and creativity. Paul Fauerso and George Marsh, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, I'm glad I wrote that for you. Yeah, that was a stroke of genius, George. That was beautiful.
And it just came out again.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Now, what a poetic expression. That was wonderful.
No, you guys deserve it, man. You know, I mean, but it comes out. I just wish I got to see you guys gig, dozens of times. But it's more like on the human level, and I really appreciate you helping me become just a stronger person. That's the lineage. That's the lineage. So, but actually, Fauerso, I wanted to ask you something because you grew up in the Bay Area, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been talking to some cats lately, and Marsh didn't get out there till mid '60s, and but I wanted you to talk about your view of the beginning of the advent of FM radio. Guys like Tom Donahue, Larry Miller.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the beginnings of the FM dial in San Francisco, in Vaco too. I'd like to get your thoughts on that stuff.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I was born in Oregon, but moved here when I was a year and a half old. So I really did grow up in the East Bay. My dad worked in Standard Oil in Richmond, and so I grew up in Richmond. And I used to take classical piano lessons from a fellow named Abe Sherman, who was the head of the piano department at Cal Berkeley, and he taught Dave Brubeck's sons.
Mm.
So when we had student recitals, Dave would show up, which was pretty cool, because by the time I was 11 years old or 12 years old, Take Five came out, and I was mad for Dave Brubeck. So here all of a sudden, there he is at our student piano recital. So that was kind of cool. But then I really kind of discovered it was like any other young kid. My parents were very, very musical, so they had subscriptions to the San Francisco Symphony and the opera. And I was talking with my sister today. We were reminiscing about what San Francisco was like in the 50s and early 60s. I'm a little bit off your question here, but
no, it's fine. It's fine. This is a stream of consciousness, so just go where it goes.
Yeah. And it was different then, obviously. My recollection was that San Francisco was kind of like Paris, in the when I was a little kid, and we would go to the symphony, and then my dad would take us out to a little French restaurant somewhere in San Francisco, and it was just magical. And and my parents were really into like Count Basie and Duke Ellington and classical music, so we had a good record collection, and there was always music in the house. We had a piano in the house. My mom played a lot of old standards by ear, and she was pretty good, and they both sang, and I like that composer, Ear. Yeah, Ear is one of the greatest composers ever, It's kind of an eerly composer as well, one of the eerly music, But anyway, by the time I was 12 or so, I was really starting to get into listening to a lot of different kinds of jazz and listening to some of the soul stations. By the time I was 13 or 14 or so, I was listening to KDIA and K-Soul, and the jazz guys I liked were like Horace Silver and Mose Allison, who George has played with.
Absolutely.
Several times. And I like the kind of bluesy cats, early Herbie Hancock stuff, and that had a little bit of R&B and funk and blues feel to it, even Les McCann, Limited, that album with Lou Rawls, Stormy Monday Blues.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the first records I bought, and it was made a huge impression on me. When I started singing, which was around after the summer after I graduated from high school, I finally started singing a little bit, and I was heavily influenced by Lou Rawls, and people used to say, "Man, you sound like Lou Rawls." So that record had a huge influence on me. But to get back to the radio thing, in high school, I listened to I was into like R&B and soul in high school, and I listened to KDIA, which was when you were interviewing Bill Champlin, it was so funny because a lot of the stuff he was saying was exactly my experience. White boy in the East Bay, listening to this stuff, and KDIA had fantastic DJs, and they played all kinds of stuff. They'd play like stuff from real obscure Southern labels sometimes, and there were when I started the Loading Zone, the first incarnation of the Loading Zone, and left home and moved in with my bandmates. We were living over on Wheeler and Woolsey, which is right on the line between Berkeley and Oakland, just up from Shattuck Avenue. And it was kind of like a sort of a lower middle class black neighborhood. And they had these little record stores in the neighborhood, that were mainly 45s. And we used to go over there, and they had all these like records from the South, 45s and stuff. They had little booths, and you could listen to them and stuff. So we got a lot of the original Loading Zones, the covers that we did, a lot of them, like we did Southern Country Boy by the Carter Brothers or something, and these kind of obscure Southern records that we bought. It was awesome, man.
I love
mom and pop neighborhood stores. I think if they're there now, it's all hip hop and rap. But back then, it was like blues and R&B and like Chitlin Circuit stuff. So we loved all that stuff. And then I listened to the radio stations, KDIA, and K-Soul was the other one in San Francisco. I also listened to KYA, I guess it was. That was
I guess Marsh, who I interviewed was the engineer Jim Stern.
Yeah, sure.
And Jim was talking about the idea that there was a cat who his name was Larry Miller, and he was going to state school, and in order to he was able to buy out, like, on this FM station. It wasn't KSAN. It was the first one. He bought out 6 hours of nighttime radio, midnight to 6 in the morning, and he did his homework. He was the first guy, though, that Stern said that played full sides of British prog rock. All these like.
Oh wow.
Maybe a station ID, or he would just flip the side. So it was the first time that you were able to hear a full-length album with, before maybe you get one side of a 45. You get one song, right? That's what his point...
And I'm not really addressing your question specifically now that I realize it, because KDIA and K-Soul, I believe, were AM stations. They were not FM stations.
Right.
They were like Bay Area soul stations. One interesting thing was that Sly Stone was a disc jockey on K-Soul, and he had a little upright piano in his studio, and he would spin records. And the introduction to his show was from Lord Buckley's The Nazz, and so they would say, who's the coolest, the grooviest, the swingingest cat that ever stomped on this jumping green sphere? And they call it his Yeah Cat, and then they'd go, Sly Stone! And then he'd come on, and he'd spin records, but then in the middle of the show, he'd go, hey, I just wrote a tune today, man, check this out, and he'd play it and sing it on the air. So that was a very different time. But to get back to your question, FM.
This is FM, a little before Sly Stone. This is what I'm getting at,
Yeah. This was when he was producing people like Bobby Freeman, Do the Swim, and Sly and the Mojo Men was his first band. So this is back in 64, 65, around there, before Sly and the Family Stone came out.
Right.
And when Sly and the Family Stone came out, Linda Tillery was in the zone by then, and I remember she bought the album and brought it in and said, oh wow, listen to these guys, because that was a huge deal. But to get back to what you were saying, FM radio was a real phenomenon. I mean, the fact that, like you say, they would sort of advertise it, and everybody knew, hey, if you want to get a free album for the price of a cassette, and you had a way to record it off the air. It's like we're going to play the new Stones album or the new, Temptations album or whatever. We're going to play it at 11 o'clock tonight with no commercial interruption.
Exactly.
And all that was saying was, fire up your cassette recorder and, record the album.
George, did you have did you listen to a lot of radio in Chicago?
Well, actually, no. I listened to a lot of radio in St. Louis or Belleville, where I grew up.
Right.
And when I was 12, I'd listen to Robert B.Q. And he would be coming on around 11 o'clock or 12 at night, and I would be upstairs in my bedroom with a little crystal earphone, which I connected to a 1941 Philco radio. I had disconnected the speaker wires and connected those wires to this little crystal earphone bud, and then I would put that in my ear and listen to Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich do a drum battle along with Coleman Hawkins and Oscar Peterson and these people playing. And then they'd have something by Charlie Parker. And then they'd have Arnett Cobb and just great music. But this is the African American audience in the greater St. Louis area. And I'd pick that up in Belleville, which was close to St. Louis. So that's basically what I listened to.
And about what year would that be?
Well, if I was 12, I was born in 41.
Okay.
It's like 53?
53. Yeah, that's great.
and Spider Burks was another one that used to do that. And I actually have a bootleg recording of Miles Davis playing over Peacock Alley, where I used to go when I was 15. I think I was about 17 when I was with friends and we heard Miles and Coltrane and Philly Joe, and it was I was there a couple of those nights, and it was to hear these guys. It was incredible, and actually there's a bootleg recording of one of those nights that was over the radio, and Spider Burks announced it, and you get to, you used to hear this stuff. It was just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and it seemed actually the appreciation for improvisational music was just much higher as well. I mean, it was just understood a lot better. The listening skills of the audience were much better. I talked to the skipper Henry Franklin, great bass player in Southern California, and he just went to China for 6 months, and he played 182 out of 186 days there. It was a great gig with like a trio, just like piano, bass, drums, probably playing standards, but just swinging really hard. And he just said it. He goes, it was a little odd though to look out in the crowd and just people were just staring at their iPhones.
Oh my God!
Not it's just background. It's back.
Well, I've heard that. I read an article recently that was talking about how concert audiences have changed.
Absolutely.
And even for acts that they like, whether it's young alternative bands or whatever, they go to whoever they're going to see. The musicians are starting to complain because they look out in the audience and they're in the middle of their set or their concert and everybody's looking at their iPhone. And a lot of times what they're doing is they're searching around to see if they're missing out on something that's cooler than where they are at the moment. So, and then if they find it, they bail, and then they leave and run across town to whatever else is supposed to be hipper than where they are. So it's what we're talking about, of course, is how the world continues to change.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we were talking about today was back in the day, and I don't know, maybe it always feels like this as you get older and you've seen so much and you've heard so much. When you're young, you yourself are innocent and green, and it's like you're discovering music, like discovering Horace Silver or discovering Coltrane or Miles at the time when they were playing live, and then you were buying their records, and it's like, oh my God, this stuff is amazing, and this makes me feel so good, and then you're really, if you have any musical acumen and you can follow along with it, because some of that stuff, as is intellectually challenging. I remember hearing Roland Kirk play a 10-minute tenor solo at the both end once, and doing circular breathing, and it wasn't just some dude up there like noodling around.
Yeah.
It was like a masterpiece.
It gets back to one thing you said, though. If these people that are like zoning out on their iPhones, speaking of the zone, when we played at the Fillmore, we had audiences that were so down because of Reds that they didn't respond at all. And it's true. We would play, and there's nothing happening.
No, you told Marsh. You told the classic story, or I think it was Marsh. You said the Zone played the first set at the Fillmore, or it was one of these clubs, and no audience response at all. They were just whacked out of their minds. Then you came out and played that 50-minute, 20. You just hit them with a 25-minute improvisational, frenzied attack, and one guy in the back started clapping, and then everybody started to clap.
Right.
That was amazing because we came out and we were like, well, that didn't work.
No, you're really frustrated.
So we can do whatever the hell we want. And we were a little bit pissed off. So I remember we started very slow and soft and with a lot of space and building. And then as it went along, it kept building and building and getting louder and denser and louder and full of more rage and just chaos until we were it was a wall of just screaming sound. We were all just at the full volume, and George was just unleashing waves of stuff on his drums. And then at the very height of that, at the peak, all of a sudden, without a signal from me or from anyone else, it just stopped. It was like, we all just stopped. It was like very strange. And then it was dead silence. Well, we were done. We were through with it. Yeah, we were through. Yeah. But it was like, we literally all stopped on a dime, and there was no beat to stop on, and it just stopped, and then it was like this huge silence, which was cool, because it was so loud.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, just boom, and it was over, and we were looking at each other, and then there was that one guy in the back just kind of clap. Yeah. Yeah, that was.
No, I'm just saying. I just, I look at it and I say, like, the music is a worldwide phenomenon now, and it's to me it's like, but if other cultures don't, like in China, I mean, if and the Chinese Fauerso pretty well, you've been over there, and I mean, I know that culture too, and it's like, the nuances of music sometimes go past them. So it's sort of like, there's a connection there. You guys were able to, you lived through what culminated ultimately in like the East Coast hard bop era of like Horace Silver and Art Blakey and Train and Miles and the Fusion, and that those names and the sort of infrastructure that was in place does not exist anymore, nor do the audiences have the attention span to appreciate improvisational music. That's on a consistent basis, and I think that's why people just look at it as sort of background music now, and it's so you really kind of have to shake them up. You have to get in their face and wake them up a little bit. But they were either out of their minds, stoned, or checked out.
This is a little off what you were saying, but the music that I grew up with, it was always swinging. And when it turned into, it was Buddy Rich and Coleman Hawkins, and then when I heard Charlie Parker, it was still swinging. I heard Miles, it was still swinging. Heard Hard Bop, it's still swinging. Horace Silver's still swinging. On and on and on, it's still swinging. Then all of a sudden, it started to not swing. It's like it started to go away. They were losing it. And then you get into fusion, some of which was really good. The stuff was still swinging. And then it started to not swing. And it's like, okay, well, whatever it is, it is. But there's a certain quality in the swing, and that might be some kind of love or openness or juiciness, something about that, very human. It's like, here we are, we're really doing this together. You might be dancing inside your body or dancing on the dance floor, and then, I don't know, man, it's like, nobody gives a shit.
Well, and there's a lot of factors that come into play, of course, and
sure.
One of them is that, the invention of the drum machine, and then taking in the disco era, taking a perfect bar or two that the drummer plays and then literally looping it with a tape loop. Now we have digital loops, but back in the day, the disco producers would get the drummer to lay down a 4-on-the-floor disco beat, get 2 to 4 bars that were just locked.
And they were all the same tempo.
And then just loop it, and then build the disco track on that.
Wow.
And then drum machines showed up. You know, the Roland drum machines that they used in the early hip hop stuff, the 808 and the 909, and then the Linn drum was a huge thing when that showed up, and all the early Prince stuff was done with a Linn drum. And then suddenly you started having this stuff in the 80s that was like very machine-like, because it was a machine that was playing these beats.
And another thing, it sounded like guns. It sounded like shotguns. It sounded like war.
Machine guns. You said machine guns.
Yeah, the backbeats sounded like guns.
Guns going off.
Like, wait a minute.
Yep. And so then people started getting, and then of course, once we got out of recording onto tape, suddenly then Pro Tools shows up, and then you've got this non-linear recording, which has many, many wonderful advantages. You know, it's almost like you have too many options now, because you can take anything and cut and paste it and affect it and do all this kind of stuff like a word processor, but with all the musical material. You can take a drummer's performance and quantize the audio file. Not the MIDI. It's not MIDI. It's the actual audio file. It'll go in, you know, detect the beats and quantize that performance. So you can have a drummer that can't keep time or do anything and make him sound like a drum machine, or slightly quantize that track or do whatever. And then, of course, you can auto-tune the singer. You can quantize the guitarist and the bass player. You can make everything locked to the grid, and people start getting used to that. And they're like, oh, this is music where everything happens at the same time and everything is perfect. Well, and there are certain kinds of music, like some of that early British synth stuff, like Erasure, or there's a bunch of bands I can't think, Depeche Mode, where they use drum machines, and the music is written for that kind of effect. And I like some of that stuff because I listen to all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
and,
yes, you do.
When it's designed like that, and it's written like that, and it's produced like that, sometimes it's right, because that's what they want. They want that effect. They want it to be machine-like. They want it to be perfect. But if you take those parameters and put them on everything, then you just end up with, like George said, music that doesn't swing, music that doesn't breathe, music that you don't want all the music to sound like it's being made by machines and robots.
And it just sounds like noise. It just sounds like noise.
Yeah.
Noise.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just it's gone from like machine guns to just sort of like this loud, blaring. I hear my girls singing the lyrics of this, just like these insane, like, and I'm like, this is, and it's cool. I mean, it has its place, and there's, I'm romanticizing this period, and it wasn't, it had all of its, it was just as fucked up as it, if not more, it's just,
one thing about the music that we're talking about, though, we worked really hard at it. It was quite a lot of work to play. You really had to put a lot of focus in it. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's still the case, but there was an aspect of what we were doing in which there was call and response, there was breathing together, tempos moved slightly up, slightly down. Everyone was always balancing, constantly. That's another way of relating. And if it's all on a metronome, I suppose it makes part of that easier, but I also think it takes away some of the pull. Like I've heard some things with Airto and Chick Corea and Florida Purine from a long time ago, in which you listen to each part, and they're all in separate places in a way. It was all live, but they balanced it out. You could never do that with these machines. There's just no way. So the actual subtleties of how people play together, a lot of that is actually erased. It's gone. And even some of the studio players, you hear them, and to me, I'm just speaking subjectively, but to me it's very boring. It's like, well, where's the pull? I'm not hearing anything in there that interests me particularly. I'm not hearing what are they doing? Yep. They're playing a beat steady. And, you know, if a drummer wants to do that, I say more power. It's good. I hear these rock bands. It seems like dumb music, but they're doing it, and they're doing it really well. And, okay, that's fine. It doesn't interest me personally. I'm just like, you know, I'd rather than put it down. What I don't like is, you know, I get to hear stuff that's more interesting.
Well, that's the point. Is that as we got farther and farther along, you talk about the ingenuity, the creativity, the thing about you guys also is that you did not. You went to good public schools, but there was no jazz academia at all. You guys are making up the rules on your own, and you were, and so now it's you know, Marsh, you're kind of at a different. I mean, you're on the West Coast, but I mean, there are these factories now that are like, you know, same thing. Like, you know, they churn out these monster guys with monster chops. Leland Sklar would call them Nam Show chops. You know, like
that's perfect.
It is, and it's and you know, but it's sort of it's a translation of also the concept of the younger cats. They can't hold the groove. They can't swing. They can't swing for so long. They can't swing. That's the problem. They have to get. Right. When I talk to Sklar, if you go back and listen to the album with Billy Cobham, Spectrum, there's the song Stratus on there, and it's this pulsating rhythm. And Stanley Clarke was supposed to be on the album, but they brought Sklar, they flew him in, and if you listen to his bass line, it's this hypnotic, repetitive. It's just playing it's very simply over one or two chords. But that it locked it in, and just that does not, you can't. People don't swing like that anymore. That some of that attitude, some of that moxie, some of that intestinal fortitude, and I mean, I think it's because of what you were saying, which is the technological advances have caused great convenience, but they've also people have slacked on their chops. They're not craftsmen anymore. Everything can be fixed now.
Well, and like you say, these kind of Nam Show chops, to me are also, for the most part, I become bored very fast with that stuff, because the purpose of it seems to be, look how fast I can play. And, you know, okay, I get it. You can play really fast, and you can play a whole lot of notes, and you've practiced a whole lot to do that, but it's just to do that. You know, I'm not saying everybody is like that. There are some exceptions, but you know that kind of just filling up every bar with as many notes as you possibly can play. It's to me, it's real. It's a show-offy kind of egotistical kind of. I guess it's sort of it's somewhat related to the cutting sessions. You know, where cats would always try to outdo each other, but. To me, I could care less, man. When you listen to the great Miles stuff from the '60s, I mean, the cat was playing like 3 or 4 notes here and there, but they were killing you. You know, just absolutely killing you, because it was coming from a really deep place. I would much rather hear someone do that, and I don't care how fast you can play or what your chops are. And in fact, I always feel like, you know, I don't practice very much, and I don't have monster chops. But all I'm trying to do is share with you something that is me. And, you know, and I like, both George and I like that, the feel, the groove, the silence, the simplicity, the sort of more egoless playing, if you will. You know, I always feel like it's, if you get out of the way and just don't think about it too much, then at first you think to yourself, well, that wasn't anything. We just were goofing around. And then you go back and listen to it, and you're going like, oh.
That's right.
Well, that's got something really nice to it. It's not showing off, but it has something to it that moves you and makes you feel good or makes you feel in a certain way.
I think another part of this is that when you're young, it's natural to want to play fast.
Yeah.
And you're exploring it because you don't even know yet.
Yeah.
And you hear people that have great chops, and I teach a lot of drummers, and a lot of them want to play fast. Mm-hmm. And I think that what could help them and maybe help other players is be in a band with elders. Mm-hmm. And the elder's going to say, hey, stop that.
Right.
That was nice, but not nice enough. Mm-hmm. now do it better. Play it with fewer notes, or make the fast notes have more meaning. But just someone to say to you, tap you on the shoulder and say, yeah. And then when they're doing it right, say, yeah. Now, that means that the person that's playing really fast and doing it has to have someone that they're actually going to trust.
Right.
So, I played with David Grisman, and that music requires fast notes, but the placement is so important. It has to keep moving. It's very interesting, and and it's very clear though, because that's how it's supposed to work that way.
Right.
And but I've also played with players that just play over you, and it's like, I think it's kind of interesting. But I do think that when you're young, you're punkish.
Yes.
And if you're not, you wonder why, and you have that energy, and you're going to let it out. So one way to do it, and I've done this before, you practice a whole lot. Stick control this, stick control that, blah, blah, blah. You do this. I did this when I was in college, and I went and played some gigs. I sounded terrible. I sat down, and it's like all this garbage came out. So luckily, I realized, oh, okay, well, I get that. I can practice and I can do incredibly fast paradiddles with flams in there. Well, so what?
Yeah.
And so it's what does have meaning? What has meaning? And then it gets down to, for drumming, well, maybe it's quarter notes and eighth notes that you can play, and you can have them have meaning. I don't know, you play them, and I'll swing some of those notes, and they have meaning. And then you have this placement of the notes. Oh, that has meaning. Oh, now I can fill in a little bit in between these notes. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And the other thing that comes to mind is something that Bill Evans said in that wonderful interview you can see on YouTube. It's in black and white. I think it's when he was playing in Europe,
Yeah.
But they interviewed him, and one of the things that sticks with me, I think George turned me on to this interview. One of the things that he said was, it's important when you get on the stand, okay, you're going to woodshed or do whatever amount of practicing you're going to do, and some cats practice much more than others. I will admit that I am not one of those guys that just practice for hours and
You
hours
need to stop
and hours
saying that. You need to stop talking about that, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh,
You can edit that out.
yeah, you can edit
Jake,
that.
edit that out.
But what Bill Evans said what he said that really stuck with me in that interview, he said, do your homework, do whatever you do, but then when you get on the stage, don't try to play outside yourself.
Right.
In other words, don't try to play faster than you can comfortably, or don't try to do this or that to show off. When you get up on the stage, play what you are, and whatever that is. So if that means you don't play real fast, that doesn't matter. What matter, or if you do play fast, fine. There are places where suddenly someone explodes with some really fast playing, and if it's right, and if it's meaningful, and if they can do it comfortably, then everybody enjoys. But if some dude is up there like trying to show off and play out beyond himself, everyone gets uncomfortable, and no one digs it, because then it's like, wait a minute, I don't like the way this feels. Does that make sense?
Well, I just think that also, there were opportunities. I think younger cats feel a lot of pressure they have to squeeze they want to show their individuality. The point I was making about the Leland Sklar thing was that he just kept it in this hypnotic do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and just over and over and over. But he watches all these younger cats on YouTube, because that song's been copied millions of times, and they can never stay in that groove. They have to constantly have all these solos and these ideas, and pretty soon they're just wailing away. And it's like, that's not the bass's job. The bass's job is to lock that groove.
But also, it might be that they shouldn't be playing that tune, and they shouldn't be trying to copy that. That's the other thing. And I look at it, if those bass players want to do all kinds of things that are different, then they should find other players that do that, and do it so that what they're doing is actually accepted and responded to. And then, because I myself, if I'm in a band and they want me to play the same thing over and over again, the same thing, I won't do it. And and I will be bored, well, give me 35 seconds. I'm not that guy. And then there are drummers that keep playing the same thing, and they do a beautiful job of it, and I fully honor them with my heart. And I don't have to do it. See, there was a time when you're supposed to do all this, and you get called, and you're supposed to play this beat and that beat, and on and on. I've never been that guy. And some people are so good at that, and they can make a lot of money in the studio and actually enjoy themselves.
No, but Marsh, I'm talking more about like it's more of a mental toughness thing. It's more mentally strong. We can't hold the groove for so long. Has nothing.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I mean, this has nothing to do with like I know that's.
I get what you're saying. Sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's just we've just been continually speeding up. But Marsh, there's one thing I wanted to ask you about. We never have talked about this, and I am fascinated. Could you talk a little bit about the work you did with Terry Riley?
Sure. Terry and I got together with him and George Brooks and Molly Holm and Bill Douglas. Gosh, I forget that.
You were with Bill Douglas. It was a jazz symphonic
bass player.
No, I know. I'm like, I can't even imagine what this music must sound like. I've never seen the albums.
We didn't make an album.
I thought you were on these Terry Riley albums. I don't know. I guess I got confused on that.
Well, no, I was on something that he did called NC, which is a really important composition. Some people consider it one of the most important compositions of the 20th century.
Why?
Because it has 52 modules, elements that start one at a time, and people play them in tempo, with the piano keeping the tempo going, a constant C being played, and with octaves, and people bring these elements in, and they start to overlap, and it takes about an hour to play it. And there's all these cross pulses that happen. Wow. And so it's like a jam session for people who read music, but you don't have to be that great of a reader. And every time it's played, it's completely different. And it was one of the extremely important compositions in the movement called minimal movement of composition. And we did a performance, and I played drums on that performance. It was recorded, and I remember afterwards, I thought that we had been playing maybe 35 or 40 minutes, and it was something like an hour and 10. Seriously. And then after that, he said, well, you want to get in the band? I said, yeah.
Oh, man.
If it does that to you. And we went around, and we played some pieces of his, and he and I worked together and took some African rhythms, and we played it. And it was really nice, and it just didn't quite gel. It almost did. Mm-hmm. In fact, I would say that it did, but it didn't want to go on much longer. Mm-hmm. And so we played in, I guess we played in Germany and Belgium and various places in Italy. It was fun, and people showed up, and most of them wanted to hear NC.
Right.
What year was that, George?
I guess it was 89, somewhere around. Somewhere.
That's so. I mean, it's just these are all the pieces of the, and then Fauerso. I'm serious. I saw that album today. There's a sealed copy of that one in Mesa, with you and Love and Charles Lloyd on it. I mean, how did that group? It was like all a bunch of TM teachers. They're like, yo, let's get an album together. How did you put that together?
Well, yeah, I think the commonality there was that we were all practicing transcendental meditation, and I actually met Mike Love on my teacher training course in Mallorca, Spain. He and Al Jardine both took that course.
Right.
So they are officially TM teachers. I don't know if they've ever taught anyone. I've taught quite a few people over the years to meditate, and I think you know the story about how I sold my Hammond B3 to go on my teacher training course. That's kind of a good story.
Yeah, we know that one. But I'm just that album. Like, is there chanting? I've seen a couple different ones.
Well, you know what it was that Mike Love, Charles Lloyd, Ron Altbach, who was in the group King Harvest, Dancing in the Moonlight.
Exactly. Yes.
Song.
Yes.
So
yes.
Ron, Mike, Charles, me, we were all TM guys, and Charles, I don't know what happened there. He got disillusioned with the whole jazz scene, and did get into TM. So I think he just withdrew from the jazz scene for a while, and started playing with the Beach Boys, which was odd. And
that is out there.
And then really out there. And
really
he was he has some Native American blood, so
Sure.
he was painting his face and wearing feathers and doing different hippie kind of things. And so I think they started a label called Love Songs. And Mike Love had heard an album that I produced with Henry Louis called Something Good Is Happening, the Natural Tendency album that was me and another guy named Rick Stanley. I think you know about that.
Yeah, no, I've seen that album too. Those are two unbelievable albums, dude.
Yeah, well, the Something Good Is Happening is kind of a collector's item because they're hardly impressed. And it's all these songs about meditating and stuff, you know. And Henry produced it, and he and I produced it together, and, you know, he got all these people like Tom Scott to come on board, and, you know, the guy Doug Dillard from the Dillards, and called in a bunch of favors. Emil Richards played on that album, and, you know, Emil, you've interviewed him. He's such a cool dude.
He's such a great man.
I would really like to reconnect with him. I haven't seen him in forever. But you know, so I think they got a bunch of German tax shelter money or something like that to start this label. So Love called me up. I was living in San Antonio getting my belated piano degree, and he said, we're starting this label, and I want you to come out and produce some albums. So that I sort of worked out a deal with those guys, and my wife and I moved out with our two little girls to Malibu, and lived in Malibu for 5 years, and I started producing all these albums. And Charles did, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 albums on that label, Love Songs. And I actually sang on a song he wrote called Marvin. That was a tribute to Marvin Gaye. And he had some cool players on some of his albums. He had Mark Isham.
Sure.
You know, Mark Isham had a group called Group 87 with Patrick Hearn on bass, who's pretty well known, and Mark Isham, and I can't remember what the guitarist's name was, but they were all, you know, well-known guys, and they had a record deal. And Charles had them playing on these albums. And then Celebration was a one-off deal with Mike and the lead singer from King Harvest and Ron and Charles and me. Doc Robinson was that guy's name. He was the lead singer.
Doc Robinson.
Yep, who I think passed away either this year or last year. So, yeah, I mean, you know, we were just doing whatever. We were just putting together different albums. But the first Mike Love, I produced 2 solo albums for Mike. The first one, you know, both of them, he just sang me melodies, and then I would do all the arrangements of the tracks and everything. And the first one, he just didn't ever discuss the budget. He just said, you know, put it together. So I hired Ian Freebairn Smith to do all the string arrangements, hired the Tower of Power horn section, who are all old friends,
Wow.
put them on up at the record plant, and had, you know, Clyde King and the Blackberries and all these awesome, you know, background singers on it, and it was a blast. We cut all the string dates at the old Capitol Records string room where Sinatra did all of his stuff, and, you know, it was all old school analog tape, Neve and Studer, Neve consoles and Studer tape machines, and, you know, a lot of fun. So that's kind of where that came from. I can't even remember what's on that album. I don't think it's there's a lot of memorable stuff on there. But
I just love the fact that, I mean, I interviewed Lloyd a couple months ago, and his wife.
Yeah, I listened to that. That was a cool interview.
No. The you listen to the excerpt. The full interview gets extremely contentious because his wife came into the room about halfway through and was really, you know, typical woman, you know, like basically saying, you know, push the new, what is this guy talking? I was going back in time, Jimmy Lunsford, you know, we were talking about Memphis, you know, like I had him rolling, you know, he was having a ball. And then his wife came in and was like, what are you talking about? Talk about what's going on now. Talk about what's happening right now, you know? And so the next thing you know, he's like, he said to me, Fauerso, he said the funniest thing. He goes, you know, I appreciate you, you know, you're on this journey of, and he paused, he goes, inner life, he said.
Wow.
Inner life. And I was like, holy shit. He's like, I can appreciate your journey of it, but his whole mood changed. And then I brought up George Avakian, and he, I think it was, I didn't mean to do it, but apparently there's some real bad blood. He went apoplectic, and I'll send you the whole interview because he lost his mind. But
I would like to hear that. Well, he's an unusual, unusual person. Like one minute he was like the nicest guy, and you were like his best friend. And when he was like that, the guy was the coolest, sweetest guy to be around on earth, really, and funny, and just amazing. And then the next day, it was all of a sudden like a completely different person. It was like, whoa.
Yeah,
wait a minute, what happened? So I don't know, and I don't know him that well. I only had the dealings with him during that time, when we were making these albums. But, very unusual, weird dude.
Unlike us, we're really normal.
Yeah, we're normal.
No, you got. I mean, Marsh. How do you play? Talk to the audience about playing, giving yourself creative freedom within a structured setting like this kind of Grisman sextet, where it's a very set list. You guys are really locked in. You get very tight, and how do you continue to create within the space, even if it is more straight ahead?
Number one, David Grisman is a master. He is someone who plays mandolin, and I have never heard a solo of his that wasn't a really good solo, even if he hated it. So he sings, and his spirit comes through those strings, and he has that ability. He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. That's number one. Number two, he wants me. Okay? And Paul and I were talking about this. He knows how I play. He knows that I'll play with him and offer him something. Okay, that's number two. Number three is I trust his ability to arrange. So we'll be playing, and he'll suggest things that he wants. And you know what? He's right. It's not as if, I have a better idea, David, I'll play this. Maybe occasionally, but really not. He really knows what he's doing. Okay, so we do that. That's the third thing. There's a fourth thing. It's a chamber group. It has a certain volume level. It requires a certain dynamic, volume, and a certain intensity within that. And when I finally figured that out, the magic happened, and this happened many, many years ago. So something that happened was the connection between the players, and all of a sudden, I'm part of something that's like a string quartet, except that I was playing drums in this other group. It's an amazing feeling, amazing. It's like you're inside of it, and you can stand out, and then within that, I'm asked to play who I am. So those are the parameters, and we have to work very hard at that. And I was speaking about that earlier, about what music might be a little different now. Maybe not, certainly not in all cases, but there's a lot of work, focus, and listening and attention. There's dynamics, there's changes that have to happen. There's certain accents that have to be there, and we're all doing it together. And there's all kinds of harmonies that move, and there's little things here and there, and it's just exquisite when it's done correctly. And it's very satisfying. And actually, we're talking about audiences that don't listen. I've played many concerts where you can look out, and everyone is very happy. They're totally loving it, and one of the reasons is because we do. Yeah.
That's right.
So,
that's exactly right.
Now, it might be another group in which we're playing improvised music, like Pauline Oliveras, and it's completely free, and there'll be an audience there. We've done this, in New York, and the people out there are really loving it, and we're all playing honestly the way we should be together, because it's Pauline Oliveras, another master, another one, and completely different from David Grisman. Yet there's something that's the same. And I like all kinds of music that comes from that place, and that also where the people actually want me to play. It's real simple. I like to be heard. I like to be loved. I like the people to understand what I'm doing and respond to it. And if I do play in certain situations where people don't seem to hear what I'm doing, and that doesn't get changed over a certain period of time, then I'll just kind of move on. It's hard to explain that exactly, except that some people, maybe their way of listening, or maybe we just shouldn't play together, or maybe they haven't developed the ability to listen. There's so many different ways to listen, and in some ways it's all the same. You have I'm playing drums. I play the drum part. I'm not playing the saxophone part or Paul's part when we're playing together. I'm playing that part. Okay, what is that going to be with Paul? He plays these incredible funky grooves, and we both like to relax. Okay, that's what that is.
Exactly.
I can live there. I can go do all kinds of things there. Pauline likes to go what she calls deep listening, in which you focus really another way inside yourself. She has her limitations. We make sounds. I listen to her. I understand what the drum part's going to be. Mm-hmm. So, man, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but that is how I approach it. Or with Mel Martin or whoever it is, if it's a jazz, straight-ahead jazz thing, I do my best to play that drum part, although some of the things that are expected are kind of boring to me, but not all of them, that's for sure. Yeah. Does it kind of make sense?
You know, to me, it's like, I always wonder how did you feel you were perceived by like straight ahead jazz drummers? Do you feel like, I mean, your style is so unique. I only say this because, and it was, you know, well, just.
Well, I don't think I was accepted by a lot of the straight ahead guys.
I was going to say, because, I mean, Dick Burke.
Back in the Keystone Corner days and Todd Barkin days, I loved Keystone Corner, but they hardly ever called me. That's the real fact of it. I played too weird.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, and that's the thing is, like, I think that honesty is it's awesome because, but it also speaks to how secure you are, and even cats like Dick Burke, like, who I love, rest in peace. Like, he was insecure about your drumming style. I mean,
mine?
Yes. I mean, this.
Why?
Well, I mean,
my style.
Well, no, he said he's like
Dick Burke. He's a really nice drummer. He plays real straight ahead.
Real straight ahead. Real straight. And so with you talking there about wanting to be heard, wanting to be loved, wanting to connect with the audience, having something to say, that is that can make a lot of other people be like they don't know what they don't understand it. And so they sort of get insecure about it. And Dick Burke is the sweetest man. I love the man to death. And you know, what a support and everything. But he said I brought up George Marsh, and he's like, you know, man, a lot of guys used to make fun of him. I was like, what? I'm like, that's because he was playing like George Marsh in every setting. He was being himself in every setting that he was in. The more I look back on it, I say, I've never heard Dick Burke insult anybody. He must have been insecure about Marsh. Marsh must have been a really badass drummer, because for him to say that was absurd.
Well, no, he's a good drummer. I heard him play, and he just played time.
That's
and he
right.
Really did a nice job of it.
Right. It's vanilla.
The other guy that did that is Vince Ladiano, and he still does it. He does it really well. He's a really nice player. But it's a drummer that plays time, and they love doing that. And they're much loved by certain players who want a drummer to do that. Mm-hmm. And I, unfortunately, got tired of that when I was around 18. It doesn't mean anything except I got tired of it. That's all. I mean, yeah, you know, it's like...
But, you know, let me jump in here and just
go
say
ahead.
something from my experience, because when I started the Loading Zone, I was 18 years old. You know, a very young guy I thought I was going to major in music at San Francisco State. I lasted 5 weeks, and I could feel how everyone was starting a band. You know, the Warlocks,
right,
who became the Grateful Dead, started around that time. The Gollywogs, who became Creedence Clearwater, started then. You know, the Great Society, the Jefferson Airplane. You know, everybody was starting a band, and I could feel it, and I was like, wow. I don't want to go to college right now. I want to get in the middle of this stuff. So I did, and because I guess I was the lead singer, and I brought in a couple of guys that were in my little jazz trio to start the band up, and then we hooked up with a couple of guys that were in the Marbles, Pete Shapiro and Steve Dowler. But, you know, I guess because I was the leader of my little jazz trio, I sort of became the leader of the Loading Zone. I was the lead singer, you know, and keyboard player. So I was a leader. So then, you know, Linda Tillery joined the band. We added horns. I got a B3. You know, we became a different band. And then Linda dropped out to pursue her solo career. And, you know, it's sort of like that first version of the Loading Zone after making our record on RCA, it just sort of collapsed and folded. So then we put out an ad, for we needed a new drummer, a new bass player, a new guitar player. Pat O'Hara was still there, and Todd Anderson, horn players, but then Todd left, and then we replaced him with Ron Taramina. But we auditioned people. So George came to audition. I think he wanted to learn how to play rock and funk, because George was, I think when he first showed up in San Francisco, correct me if I'm wrong, you were mainly a jazz drummer.
I knew how to play it, though.
Yeah.
But I wanted more.
Yeah, he wanted more, and here was an ad, the loading zone. I guess you went, wow, I'll go check these cats out.
Yeah, I left Chicago because we were playing the same kind of jazz over and over again to people who smoked, drank, and didn't listen.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so this all makes sense.
And we were really good, too, except they smoked, drank, and didn't listen. And the people who were there didn't want to get into funk and rock and odd time signatures and free music.
Right.
So I came here.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like,
brilliant.
I got to get out of here. Yeah, exactly. Totally makes sense. So George shows up. This far-out little dude, Mike Eggleston, shows up. And a little guy from the East Coast, Steve Busfield, with his big Vega hollow-body jazz guitar. And he'd been playing in sort of like, black funk bands and stuff, R&B groups. No, he's great. He was awesome. So they all showed up, and we, those of us who were still remnants from the first group, we said, yeah, we're digging these cats. But this is a long-winded way for me to say that I was still young. I mean, I was 20 years old or so.
Right.
And I was still the leader of the band, nominally, and I was trying my best to be a good leader. But I loved George, but there were times when I wanted George to play like a pocket drummer. Like just play the groove and don't play a bunch of other stuff. There were other times when I would love him doing that, but there were times when like, no, don't do that right now. And he doesn't recall this.
Well, it doesn't bother me.
But I remember. I remember.
You're okay, Marsh.
And he would be driving the beat, and I wanted him to lay back and play more like a fat back R&B drummer.
Right.
And he's a very strong-minded guy. And there were a couple little feelings of clashing there because he was like, "No, wait, dude, don't tell me what to do. I know how to play the drums. Let me play." And so I remember that as a memory. And so then once we split up, and 34 years went by, and then I called Mike and George one day and said, "Hey, let's play." And we got back together, rehearsed a little bit. We're elder funk guys now, a lot of water under the bridge. And I realized after all these years of working with other drummers in the studio and all these different projects and commercials and film scores and everything else, I realized, wait a minute. If you want a guy to sit there and play in the pocket and just behave, there's a lot of guys that can do that, like you say, George, do it very well.
Yeah.
And you honor them for that. And it's like, okay, great. But if you want someone who is going to come up with some amazing, creative drumming that is melodic and that doesn't just sit there and repeat, and somebody who's got gigantic ears and can anticipate what you're going to do in your solo and just throw things in there without you, I don't know, it's hard to explain.
No, you're doing a really damn good job of it.
That's what George does.
Right. No, I get it.
And so when I got back together with him in 2005 or 6 or whenever we got together, I realized, oh my God, don't try to ever change what this man does.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody does what he does. So just be grateful and very appreciative that you get to play with him. That was how I kind of grew up and matured, So
one thing I can say about that, when you talked about how to lay back on the field, I took that seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot from you. So seriously now, there's a way of laying back which is appropriate for certain ways of playing. I even took some of those ideas and taught Denny Zeitlin. I sat down next to Denny Zeitlin and said, "Hey, check this out, man. This is what Paul showed me.
Oh, cool.
I want you to know that.
Oh, that's great.
Other than that, I hate you." No, I mean,
we all go through all kinds of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, dude, that's why we're all... No, I mean...
That's why we're here.
Why don't you tell them about how I remember I think I already told you this, the first time you heard me and I was hired by you guys, I was playing at this place in North Beach, and the saxophone player was so pissed off at the way I played that he packed up and left. And you hired me the same gig.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Well, for Rolling Stone, we were always an odd outfit. I mean, we didn't really fit into anything. I mean, you know, we didn't look right. We weren't pretty. You know, we just were
really ugly.
We were kind of, and we had a 6 foot tall African American female singer who was awesome, but you know, it was a strange combination. And then when that fell apart, I don't know. The second version of the band was really my favorite version, and particularly when we, as you and I have talked about, Jake, I loved it when we had, just for a short period of time, the two drummers, because Frank Davis and George together was really terrifying. It was amazing. The few gigs that we played like that, I remember people's minds were completely blown. Because we were doing some free stuff, but then Frank was like this kind of a funk, fat-back drummer, and he was laying it down. George, because your ears are so big, George was learning all kinds of things from Frank, too,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
But Frank, I think, was, frankly, a little intimidated by George's chops. And so I don't know what Frank's doing now, but that was a fun time when we...
Did the Zone ever did you guys ever jam with Marvin Holmes and the Uptights?
We didn't jam with them, but I remember certainly going to the Sportsman's Lounge in Oakland to hear those cats, man. Ooh Ooh the Dragon and all that stuff. We were really, there were several clubs in Oakland that we would go to. The Sportsman's Lounge, the Mocambo Club, you know, these were like black funk clubs. And Marvin Holmes and the Uptights, man, there were some awesome bands back then.
Incredible.
You know, because, and Oakland was just a hotbed of that stuff. You know, so we would check that out, man, and they, you know, we were always welcomed in those clubs. Everybody was having a great time, and, you know, there was never a feeling like, what are you doing here? It was like, wow, come on in, man, check it out. We're happy you're here, you know, so, and we talked about all this cross-pollinization that was going on, you know. I mean, because you have to realize, the Jefferson Airplane, the first incarnation of the band was Senia Anderson, before Grace Slick joined. Senia Anderson was this cute kind of girl with, like, braids, and, you know, she was just kind of real innocent looking, very different from Grace, the Ice Queen, kind of. But they, you know, Marty Balin used to sing, the Jefferson Airplane would do Midnight Hour, the Wilson Pickett song.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't very funky, but they did it. So if people were covering, you know, R&B tunes like some of these San Francisco bands, the Dead did Midnight Hour too.
Sure.
You know, so there was a lot. It wasn't just folk rock. They were bringing in R&B, certainly blues, and it was just a wonderful mixture of stuff.
Marsh, how excited how excited are you that Fauerso now is going to be within a couple of minute walk of your house, or 8-minute drive of your house, because his sister just moved to your area?
Is this a scale of 1 to 10?
No, not. I mean, more from a musical point of view. Like, I thought about it today. I said, "What are these guys like? Is it really about creating quality, just having a fun every time you get together, or is there?"
Yes, it is. It's about having fun, but we know how to take what we're doing and produce.
Carpe diem kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Today, Paul put a vocalizer. Hey, why don't you sing over it?
Yeah.
Thought about it. Oh, okay. You know, now we have it. We actually have something. He can take that and work on it. You know, how excited it's great. I mean, we're going to, it's not as if there are, we were talking about this, there aren't like loads and loads of people that I feel real comfortable playing with.
Right.
And Paul is one of them. And they're you know, I suppose if I lived in New York it'd be different, but I really don't want to live in New York. Boy. I'll look at it.
Yeah.
No, come on, you're fine. I think it's great. I'm gonna build like a mud hut and live out by you guys so we can hang. You know.
Yeah, that would be fabulous.
Fauerso, you're not leaving Texas though. You're still in Texas.
No,
though.
no. But see, my sister was living. I have two sisters, and one lives in Modesto, and the other one was living in Bend. And she's the older of the two, and she's single, and she just didn't want to live in Bend anymore. So she bought a house in Santa Rosa and moved in May. And literally, it's an 8-minute drive from George's place. Now, I don't know that George will always live where he is right now, but I'm going to make hay while the sun shines, and I'm planning to try to come out here every month or two.
Absolutely. I mean, this is prime time. I think
totally, man.
I think that's the way I thought.
I feel like this time I didn't even have a chance. I meant to prepare something, so this was just an initial little dipping the toe in the shallow end of the pool. I think it was fun, but I didn't feel like I had the chance to. I wanted to try to have something a little bit structured to throw out there that we could work on. But now we talked about sending stuff back and forth long distance, and I think this getting back together. I mean, we haven't played it in 6 years because the last time we played together was at the CD release party at Freight and Salvage in August 2008. So literally 6 years ago. I mean, it's unbelievable how fast time goes.
That's incredible.
But it is incredible, but that's the other thing, is that time flies, and we're not getting any younger, so let's seize the moment and get together now that we have this wonderful situation.
Oh, I mean, I thought about it today, and I'm like, this is.
Yeah.
There was the original synergy and connection, with the zone, and then there was the reforming again. Amazingly, 6 years ago, we've done between you and Marsh, I've done about 8 interviews with you guys in the last 6 years, and now
there's a wonderful saxophonist that sometimes is around here. He might even be in Santa Rosa. His name's Matt Rothstein. Paul doesn't know him, but I think he could fit in. There's someone that we could actually invite over if we felt like it, who would really fit into what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Be able to get in there and scream.
Yeah, somehow the sister moving down there is just. I mean, I don't. To me, it's like, boy, that's just, you got to hit it while it's hot. And so I really.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. This is what I've been waiting for because logistics. I can't. It's hard. George can't come down to Texas and hang out for a long time and bring his drums and just all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So he's here, and now my sister's here. Simple. It's like real easy. I can just come out, bring some tunes, bring some ideas, sit around, spend 2-3 days, record a bunch of stuff. And the other cool thing is, we've kept everything isolated. So even if what I'm doing is not that great at the moment, I can take the files back, and his drum parts are all isolated. So then I can go back and build something on top of the grooves that he was playing live with me. So there's an endless opportunity and options for creating some cool stuff. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, it'll be what it is. Since you're so far away, that would be a way of playing together. Yeah, if you were here more often or longer, then we would just do it all live.
Sure.
But since that's what it is, we might as well take advantage of this incredible technology.
Well, and the thing is that, because of the stuff that I do, which is different from what George does. I mean, I'm used to making loops out of things and bringing in layering different textures and creating stuff. A friend of mine is starting a music licensing company that's going to be artist friendly, and he's partnered up with a couple of big companies, and it'll be an international music licensing company. And so people want music for film scores, they want music for TV series themes, and there's so many cable TV series now. There's international commercials. So I'm always thinking, because we need to make a living, and have fun at the same time, and create something that we feel good about. But I feel like that's another avenue. Yes, we can do a lot of things that are completely live, but then we can do something else. George sent me a long loop that he did with Cliff Hugo, the bass player that moved up here. And then I don't know if did I ever send you that North Bay Love Jones thing?
You talking? Did you send it to me?
Yeah.
No, never.
Okay, man, I got to send that to you because you'll dig it.
Yeah.
They did this long loop with just bass and drums, and George sent it to me. So then I added like an organ part, and I played a very primitive fuzz guitar part on there, and some other stuff. And then I sent it to my friend who's starting this music licensing company. He was like, "Wow, that's fantastic." So if it gets placed somewhere, then I'll split it with George and Cliff. But
I really just to me, your legacies are, you continue to build them. But Marsh, I wanted you to talk about how you define leadership, and give an example of someone who was a good leader for you.
How do I define leadership? Yeah, well, David Grisman, obviously. Mel Martin was really good. I really.
What were the qualities?
Well, he was a really excellent arranger. He wanted me for what I do, and also we would get together. I think he mentioned that in one of his responses to the last blast, that when we would get together to rehearse back in the 70s, we got together sometimes a couple times a week. There would be an hour or more spent on some kind of odd time signature or cross rhythm idea. But rhythm ideas, we would fully explore them and get into all kinds of interesting things. And then, of course, we would sort out what we liked. That one works and that one doesn't, and let's try this and that. And so, in that sense, if the leader, let's look at it this way: if the leader is going to pay me $10,000, he's a good leader. Well, yeah, there's truth to that. And certainly, and whatever you want. And
Right.
But if it's like normal, then what it would be that person wants to allow me and invite me to present ideas that person thinks I have that are valuable. And, I got lots of these things that I've explored. A lot of it is cross rhythms and how they work together. I love that stuff. And odd time signatures, to find out what's the beauty of those odd time signatures. Not just because they're odd, but try them out. What's in there? What do they do? How do they flow? How do they bounce? How do they breathe? And that in a leader is really good. Terry Riley was fun, but like I said, that group just didn't have enough elements of continuing to work in every area. I don't want to go into criticism of that. That everything doesn't work. It doesn't have to work.
Well, it's funny because when I interviewed Garibaldi, he talked about Emilio Castillo. He said the best thing about about him as a leader is that he doesn't tell you what to do, and David doesn't tell you what to do either. That's probably a very refreshing thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, Mel Martin never told me what to do.
They trust you to do your thing, right? I mean, you're not being micromanaged by somebody who doesn't know the instrument.
Unless you're just doing stuff that disturbs them. And that occasionally can happen, and if the leader has skill, they can point it out and say, "Oh yeah, okay," because it's just music. It's like a musical thing that may be happening that could be pointed out. So that's what I like in a leader. And also, I've had when I was with Jerry Hahn and the Jerry Hahn Brotherhood. Really, it was all four of us were leaders. That was a cooperative, and so. We played all those tunes, and we rearranged them. And sometimes I was the main rearranger every night. It was a shuffle one night, and the next night it wasn't. And that's just come on board, guys, and they loved it. And Mel would be playing a funky bass line one night, and the next night he's playing some kind of cross thing over it, and so Mike Finnegan would lay in what's needed, and that was a lot of fun. That was great, and the audience didn't understand it at all because when they heard the record, we didn't play that way when we played live.
Really? So the live, how was it different? Because the record was pretty hip, man. I mean,
it was different because we were improvising.
Oh man!
Ahmad Jamal said the same thing. He had these great records out, and then he would go around and people would complain because the solos weren't the same.
So ridiculous.
And Ahmad Jamal had a way of arranging in which he arranged on the spot. He would shout out to the players, head, okay, and various things, and then I love some of that stuff that he did.
Oh, man.
Just so good. But so that was in the air. It's like, you can do that. I mean, it's possible. And so the Jerry Hahn Brotherhood, I just thought that I was one of the composers, and we arrangers, put it that way. And and I do I'd play all these things. It's just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else would have hated it, but
Well,
you guys didn't hate it; they loved it.
When I think about the one album that we did together in that 24-hour period in 1969, that literally we did all the tracking. I think I sang almost all the vocals live on the album One for All. We mixed it, and we were done in one 24-hour period. And that, how often does that happen?
We never played the same way.
Yeah, no. But like when we did Think, I sang. That was a live vocal.
Yeah.
We didn't know. I don't remember discussing
a
halftime breakdown. We didn't discuss a damn thing. And you listen to that thing, and it's kind of like, whoa. And there's no way that I could have overdubbed the vocal on that properly because, it was an integral part of the thing that just happened, And,
did you tell Jake about the Field solo?
Oh,
and why he sounded that way? Tell him about it. You tell him. Go ahead. Is that all?
Well, Steve Busfield,
great guitarist.
Great guitarist, great guy, East Coast, had a different kind of vibe. He was a short little guy. And he had this hollow body Vega jazz guitar that he played. Big hollow body thing, kind of blonde jazz guitar, He was playing it like in a funk way. And he'd play, and I guess he had a fuzz tone or something, so when he soloed, it kind of sounded like a rock guitar, but it was a jazz guitar. So we booked this recording session at, it was different or I can't remember.
No, and Jim Gershio, engineer.
Oh, was it?
A great engineer.
Yeah. And so we booked this session, so Steve shows up, and he's got a blonde Les Paul, one of those Les Paul guitars like Jimmy Page played in Zeppelin. I said, what's that? He says, oh man, I heard Jeff Beck for the first time 2 days ago.
Oh.
And he said, I had to get a Les Paul. He said, you heard Jeff Beck for the first time 2 days? Yeah. So he ran out and bought a Les Paul guitar, brought it to the recording session. He'd had it like a day. Yeah, so he'd had it like one day.
Wow. And
then he's playing all this stuff, and he's doing these really way far out solos that were very cool.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Unbelievable stuff. And, by then, this is 1969, I've been meditating for 2 years, and that's all I did. I'm not, taking any drugs or doing anything. I'm just meditating twice a day. So at the end of the session, I found out that he had also decided that it was time for him to drop acid. So he had the brand new Les Paul that he'd never played, and he was on acid playing all this stuff.
It sounded great.
It does sound great. But it was an unusual situation there to do that. But the other thing
that's so great.
Not to toot our own horns, but there was a critic on the internet that did a review of that album, One for All. And what he said about Think was, he said, this is the only cover of a James Brown song that I think is better than the original.
Wow.
So I went, oh, wow, that's high praise.
Well, that's the one where I was the critic.
Oh, that's right. Under an assumed name. Yes, a nom de plume.
I like the fact that in the two tracks you sent me like maybe a 4-minute version and then like a longer one. The second version was you could just see both of your confidence was just tighter. It was really good.
Oh yeah,
the Spoonful.
Yeah, we were a well lubricated group at that point when we did that recording. I mean, Eggleston was playing out of his mind as well. I mean, and there's another guy that you should probably interview at some point because he's such an interesting and unusual cat. And Mike is a completely intuitive player. He's never had a lesson in his life. And if he practices and he's limbered up, he's awesome. As George said, he's his favorite bass player to play with, because he just responds to what's going on, and he just all of a sudden he's playing these amazing things. And even on the Blue Flame album, you know, and if he doesn't know what to play, he just stops playing, and he doesn't play for a while. So there's like there'll be space, and then he'll play a few notes when he feels like, oh, I can do this is what I should do. It's very unusual.
There's a great strength he's maintained is his ability as a painter and an artist in general. Mm-hmm. He's amazing. I have some of his paintings on the wall here in my studio. That's where we are.
Yeah, and he's just very unique.
Fauerso, you know, I haven't talked to you in a while. I really want you to talk to the audience about your concept of love, and how you bring love into the lives of all the people that you touch.
Well, let's see. I can give you a brief experience that I had once. That was an experience of pure, unadulterated, unconditional love, and that's when I was vacationing with my family on Mount Desert Island, which is out on in Maine, and they have these sort of bald granite mountains there. Cadillac Mountain is the place that the sun hits first on the east coast of the United States. So we were renting a little house there that had a 110-year-old Steinway grand piano in it. It was they had all these big summer homes there, and they had these little cottages behind where they would invite famous pianists and composers to come up for the summer. So this one had been turned into a cabin, but it still had that piano in there. So I was writing some stuff in there and really enjoying. And I was getting up every morning at like 4:30 or 5 before the sun came up, and I'd go down to this little beach. And there were these big boulders up there that faced due east. So I'd sit in there on the boulder, and then I'd take my clothes off and jump into the ocean, and baby, it was cold.
Wow.
Unbelievably cold.
Wow.
And I'd swim around for about 2 or 3 minutes. That's about all I could do. And I'd get out, dry off, put my sweat clothes on, and then sit there and start meditating as the sun came up from the east. And so I finished the meditation there, and I turned and looked down, and I saw this seaweed, these long seaweed tendrils that were being sucked into this gap between two big boulders. And as the wave, would come up and rise up, and these tendrils would be sucked into this little space, and then the wave would go back out again, and the tendril would go back out. It was so beautiful. I was just sitting there watching that. And as I did, this question from inside came up. Why? Why does that happen, and why is it so beautiful? Because it didn't have to happen, but it was happening, and it obviously had been happening probably forever. So I was like, why? And on a deep, deep level, the answer was love. And I think that at that deepest level, that's the energy that makes the world. That's all. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what my experience was. And so my feeling these days more and more is just that there's a big self and there's a little self. There's Paul Fauerso and George Marsh. Those are the little selves, the little personalities. But then there's this big self, this wholeness that is really who each one of us is at the deepest level. It's just one huge, big wholeness. And when you make the best music, that's where it's coming from.
Exactly.
It's coming from the big self, the big universal wholeness, the big self. And that's what makes everything. And I think that love is the energy that creates the world at that deepest level. And so these days, more and more, I feel that presence of the big self all the time. And so, then you feel united with people, and then the love just flows between people. Then I don't care what religion you are, what country you're from, what color you are, anything. We're all the same. We're all in the same family, and there's a saying in the Vedic tradition: "The world is my family." Vasudev Kutumbakam is how you say it in Sanskrit, and I wrote a song called "The World Is My Family." But that's more and more the feeling I have. So anytime I'm anywhere, I'm just kind of resting in that big self, and it's very blissful, it's very peaceful, and it's very natural, so I don't know.
What's the Marsh? I'll let you chime in on this too. But Paul, what is the opposite of love, though? In the sense that, like, because you talked about sort of the what you see now, what I see now a lot of the time is this, at least in the United States, there's a lot of charity and there's a lot of mercy, but there's no justice. So there's no justice, and if there's no justice, there's no fairness, then the love can be shattered. And
I'd like to chime in.
Go ahead, yeah.
I don't think love has an opposite.
That's an interesting.
Okay.
I don't think it has one at all. It's way beyond pluses and minuses and opposite.
Mm-hmm.
See, if you say that the opposite of hate is love, then hate has love in it. If you say the opposite of love is hate, then love has hate in it. I think it's another place. I think it's a place without thought. And I think it's a birthright. And it's a birthright that we all would like to rediscover. For myself, it's when I doing some body work at one time, getting it, and also doing some yoga, and it's Kundalini energy is what I would call it, was released in my whole body, and my whole body became filled with electricity, almost like my fingers were in a socket. Everything, my arms were like gyroscopes, and it cleared me so much that I felt like I was in love. And I was in love with everything, not the usual way you would say you're in love with someone. You're existing with love with them. Beautiful. There wasn't any opposite to that.
Well,
to me, anyway.
Well, recently Jim Carrey, who's a TM guy, gave the commencement address at Maharishi University of Management up in Fairfield, Iowa. He was the...
You know what, the comedian?
Yeah, the comedian.
Are you
Jim
serious?
Carrey.
He's a TMer?
I'm totally serious.
Holy
If you Google Jim Carrey commencement address at MUM,
oh my God, that's awesome!
And it went viral. They did sort of an excerpted version of it. And my wife is a founding trustee up there at the university, so she was there. I didn't go, but Jim said a very interesting thing. Apparently, I listened to parts of it. It was wonderful, but it was a great commencement speech. And one of the things that he said is, he said, you wake up every morning and you have a choice, and the choice is between love and fear, not love and hate. So it's like the opposite, in his words, the opposite of love is fear. So you either live in a fear-based world where you're always worried, about getting yours and overcoming, doing better than this guy, and it's just filled with fear, or you choose love.
Yes.
And I think how you were expressing it, George, was very profound.
Well, I think that's a different explanation or definition for love. It's the word itself is a difficult word.
Yeah. No, but I really...
about looking at the seaweed, that's another level.
Yeah.
And what I was talking about with Kundalini energy, that's something else. And so the same word is different than choosing that when you wake up. It's different. It's a different thing. I actually choose to be laughing and making jokes as soon as I get up and singing. That's love.
That's love. And I was going to say that...
That's certainly not fear.
No, because
fear
I know this.
What you just...
No,
yeah.
I know what Jim Carrey said is very... I mean, I see it. It's a person... To me, for a confluence of reasons, I wake up and, I'm not the most perfect person with my family, but I really go and approach the world to seek love. And yet I look across at people that I'm very close to, very connected to, and they live in a constant state of worry or fear.
Yes.
Fear
Exactly.
of absolutely nothing. It is
I know.
it's mindless stuff, and it preoccupies the mind. And you know what? I used to be like that. I used to
Habit
be.
farming.
I mean, I grew up with, anticipatory anxiety and part of that was just being raised, but somewhere along the line, probably when I received Tao and at the Tao ceremony, you have your information on a card and they light it and it's gone and that chapter of your life is gone and I don't feel that angst anymore, that fear, that there's almost a panic to it. And so what Kerry said to me, Marsh, I'm going to have to go back and really listen to what you said because that kind of blew my skull off. But the Kerry thing,
more about that.
The Kerry thing is it really resonates. You can really, and especially nowadays, you can be cynical, you can be fearful, and you can live in this resentment state or whatever it is.
I think we're talking about two different things. So
you're right. No, we absolutely
your head off. It's the word used two different ways.
Yeah. Well, that experience I had, I think, also relates to what you were saying, though, because it's an experience of universal, unconditional, unbounded love.
There is no nonviolence.
Yes.
There's just violence. Nonviolence? What are you talking about?
But we've been ingrained with such terminology. It's just we've been drilled. It's so you say that and it makes sense. It's also like
nonviolent movement. What are you talking about? It's in the very words. The opposite. What's the opposite of nonviolence?
Yeah.
Violence.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. It exists.
Yeah.
I think that basically it is words, and it's the use of words in our brains, and I think it fucks us up.
Yeah. that is well put, Dr. Marsh. Well put.
Thank you very much. Bill in the mail.
Well, and I also think Maharishi used to say that what you put your attention on grows. It's a very simple expression. But
right.
If you entertain negativity, like you invite it in and feed it.
Sure.
It's like, come on in and just hang out with
Watch
me.
Fox News.
Yeah, exactly. That's like entertaining negativity.
I know, man. It's ridiculous.
But if you entertain positivity, that's another way to go. And Marsha even used to say, even if you have to mood make a little bit to entertain some positivity, it's okay.
Mood make.
Your attention. Mood make means, okay, I'm not maybe feeling quite as positive as I would like to naturally, but just shift your attention over and entertain some positivity.
I love it.
It's better for you. It's going to be better for your environment. It's going to be, and then of course, transcend to that unbounded ocean of pure consciousness deep within you. However, you can do that, and it happens that TM is a very systematic, effortless, an easy way to transcend on a regular basis, and that's why I've been doing it since 1967 because it works. Period.
Dude, I still need a week of TM lessons from you.
Yeah, we need. Yeah. I'm happy. I want to teach you and whoever else wants to learn.
Don't forget fresh ground peach coffee while you're at it.
There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely.
Not to take away from the seriousness.
No, you know what? I love you guys, and I'm going to go back to my family, but I just want to say it was really beautiful to talk to you guys, and I just want you to keep I love you guys too, and just we'll be in touch. But my day was when Marsh called me this morning. He's like, "Yo, Fauerso's going to be out here," and the whole day was I was just marinating in it. So bless you both, man.
Well. Yeah, go back to your family, man. That's great, and I hope that there's something on here you can use, especially the swear words.
Oh, come on, we got all sorts of nuggets here. Fauerso, what was the yogi name for me, by the way? Bhagananda?
Bergananda.
Bergananda.
No, Jake. Yeah, Bergananda, like Yogananda.
I love it.
It's Bergananda.
All right.
I like it.
All right. Have a nightcap.
Ananda means bliss. So it's Bergen bliss.
Yeah, and I have a Zen Buddhist name, and it's Hogaku.
Oh, really?
Hogaku. That means tall mountain of the Dharma. Wow.
Wow.
And I have a primitive Viking name, and it's Large Man.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Jay.
All right, man.
guys, listen.
Thanks.
Love you, man. Take it easy, all right?
Love you too, buddy.
Take care, bro.
Okay.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.